All right.
Okay,
Hello.
wait for Drew.
Drew's back.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back? I thought you
Yeah,
were
but now I'm going to refill my coffee.
Oh, Christ.
Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our Atomic Age retrospective with the 1956 sci-fi film Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, co-author of California Tiki, coming this August from the History Press. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running indie comic Halloween Man. And coming July 4th, which is like next week, from Comixology and Sugar Skull Media, the new Lucy Chaplin Science Starlet special. Say hello, Drew.
That's actually coming out in 3 days by the time people probably hear this. It comes out on July 4th. And hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello.
Okay. Earth vs. the Flying Saucers is a 1956 American black and white sci-fi film from Columbia Pictures. It stars Hugh Marlowe and Joan Taylor, and it was released as a double feature with a movie called The Werewolf in 1956 that I have not seen. I'm curious if Drew has. The film's storyline was just... Okay, all right. The film's storyline was suggested by the best-selling nonfiction book Flying Saucers from Outer Space by Major Donald Kehoe. Drew, you've been suggesting a lot of these, so this time I'm going to let somebody else do the opening thoughts, and then when we get to you, you can tell us why you have brought us this particular film, since you're a big proponent of the Atom Age stuff. So we'll go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then if I have anything to add, I will. Tony, opening thoughts, Earth versus Flying Saucers.
I like the movie. It'd been a while since I've seen it. There's some iconic moments that always get shown when anybody talks about sci-fi movies in general. The Attack on Washington especially gets shown all the time. So it's a classic just for that. I would rather watch this than Independence Day at any given time. But
those are strong words. Why does this perform better for you than Independence Day?
I don't know if it's nostalgia. I don't know. Independence Day is kind of this.
Yeah.
So I'd rather watch the source. I don't know. It's on my own personal preferences.
I can go with that.
There's I don't know. This has more heart. To me, doesn't have, I guess also, and since it's this weird future past, the technology that they show doesn't involve just my own random things like, oh yeah, go ahead and plug a Mac into a alien system stuff. Just I don't know. It just works for me better.
That's great.
It's not fantastic, but there's a lot of really interesting parts to it. And a lot of stuff that I think sets up future sci-fi in a major way.
Beautiful. All right, Julia, the moment we started watching this movie, you said, oh, I love this movie. So I don't know, is that still true? And what are your opening thoughts?
I loved the movie. I'm trying to remember now what it was with the first. It was the Flying Saucer. Immediately when I saw the Flying Saucer, I was like, I love this movie already because that's hilarious. There is something so delightful about the special effect, the practical effects from the 50s. When you don't have CG and you don't have even a lot of matte painting necessarily, you just are like dealing with whatever you've got. And so the ingenuity of how you create these things, like I'm pretty sure that the ray that the aliens are shooting out of is like it's a thing with a jack sticking out of it, because I'm like, that looks like a jack to me. I don't know. I just thought it was so funny and cute. And that, the alien, like whatever I guess they'd be uniforms, but they're like shells, I guess.
It's armor.
Anyway, the armor. But so that stuff was delightful to me. I love that the very first scene that we have with the couple of married scientists, and Tony, I kept thinking of you with all of your, I'm a scientist, I do science things throughout this whole film. The scientist couple, or rather the scientist and his assistant, they're married and she's driving, and I was so excited. I was like, you don't even see nowadays movies where the wife is just the one driving. I'm the one who drives in our house, but when it's the two of us, because I like can't stand being a passenger. And so I was like, yeah, the wife is driving. I liked that. Right, and when they're driving, by the way, they're supposedly driving through Colorado Springs, which of course is an hour away from us. So we drive through Colorado Springs often, and it does not look like a desert. Just for the people who don't know what Colorado Springs looks like, so I was like, oh, this is the desert part of Colorado Springs that is apparently an hour away from Washington. Which I was like, how are we? Are we missing the Concorde shuttle that takes us to Washington in an hour? But whatever.
That's a really
so
good
that
point.
was
Yeah.
I enjoyed those little things. The characters were fun. I'm really interested at some point during this conversation to hear from Tony about whether any remake is worth doing, because if the idea is I prefer the original source, and Independence Day is a remake of this, I don't want to talk about the second because I want to hear what Drew has to say, but I do want to I want us to have a little bit of a talk about if something is a remake of something else, it should that ever happen. So anyway, but let's go forward.
It's a solid question.
With Drew's...
It's a solid question. Maybe better for a slightly less direct remake or indirect, something that's a more direct remake than this. But
no, but I'm interested to hear it later.
It is a solid question. Yeah. Okay, Drew. What's going on with Earth versus Flying Saucers?
Well, one of the reasons why I pushed for this movie. First off, the whole question of should we be doing on this podcast? Like, I know you apologized for this being sci-fi or whatever. This was put on a double feature with a werewolf movie. Sci-fi and horror go hand in hand. I don't understand people who like one and don't like the other, because to me, you can't have one without the other there. And I think in the early to mid-century, obviously that is the way filmmakers looked at it. I picked up this movie not because I think it's a perfect film, but I do think it's almost a pitch perfect example of this type of film, and it's certainly very fun and very charming, and it also has a lot of big sort of sci-fi horror names attached to it. First of all, the most notable is that it's got Ray Harryhausen stop motion flying saucers, and to me these are the coolest looking flying saucers. I love just anytime they're on screen. They're the coolest looking flying saucers I've in any movie. It was produced by Sam Katzman, who was a big producer of horror and sci-fi films in the 50s, and it's one of the guys who worked on the screenplay is Kurt Siodmak, who of course worked on The Wolfman among many other Universal monster films. So this has got kind of a good pedigree for our podcast. Aside from that, I just think this marks off a lot of the stuff you would like. If someone were to say show me an atomic age genre movie, this to me would be probably what I would show them, because it has the faith in bureaucracy, the faith in the military, the xenophobia, the stock footage, saucer men, crazy ray guns, like destruction of iconic buildings. Like, this really typifies a lot of what we look. It's almost like if we could take this entire retrospective and try to boil it down into one movie, this would almost be the movie that I think would be the best example of what this time period is to me. Not that I think it is the best movie that we've done, but again, I do think it's very charming. It's a lot of fun. And as Tony said, influential, not just on Independence Day, but large portions of this movie were grandfathered into the Tim Burton Mars Attacks film. So influential film and a lot of fun. And I think this is going to be a good discussion.
I just wanted to use my time to mention about Kurt Siodmak, which I have no idea how to say that name, and I know we've struggled with it before. Siodmak. Okay. Here's the thing. He wrote this movie. He also amazingly wrote The Wolfman. He was born in Dresden, Germany, and he is one of many directors who came to the United States from Germany, either before or right before World War II. We benefited so much from so many directors coming here, especially from Germany. His brother was Robert Siodmak, who was the director of, weirdly enough, Cobra Woman, which was a thing that I did for the Tiki podcast just last week. This guy was all over the place. these brothers. It's just fascinating how many Jews who were part of the diaspora managed to come here and really shape American culture. So yes, the point of this particular movie, the way I was able to wrap my head around this movie is this is an event film like Twister, only for 1956. The point of this movie, as far as I can work it out, is just to have a good time watching colossal destruction. And I think you're right. It is an excellent example of the form. And here's what's funny. I mean, this movie comes in 1956. That means that the day the Earth stood still came in 1951. Okay, War of the Worlds came in 1953. That one was in color. And then of course Harryhausen did it. Came from Beneath the Sea in 1955. This movie comes as sort of part of a conversation with all of these other invasion movies that honestly were a lot headier than this one. This one is really more about the technology and the sort of roller coaster ride. Like War of the Worlds was not a roller coaster ride. That was a tense and often terrifying film. Day the Earth Stood Still was a big, thoughtful, let's not blow ourselves up, even the aliens don't approve of us kind of thing. This one, screw that. The aliens are terrible. They want, in the words of Independence Day, no peace. They're just here to blow some stuff up, and we get to see a lot of things crumble towards the end of it. By the way, Paul Frees, who plays the voice of the alien, was also a heavily used voice in War of the Worlds, but Julia heard him a lot last week when she went to Disneyland because he's also the ghost host in the Haunted Mansion.
And by the
Okay.
way, I
Yeah.
brought Jason back a Ghost Host baseball cap as his souvenir from Disneyland because he is the
Nice.
host of this podcast, and it is oftentimes a ghost podcast.
It is. I'm so happy about that because I can walk around going, there are no doors and no way out. But
No windows.
okay,
Yep.
so this movie starts with our scientist, Dr. Russell Marvin, and like Drew said, it's a world where scientists are superheroes in a way. They're involved in something called Project Skyhook, which I believe was real, which is just a big effort to launch a lot of satellites into orbit. And the problem is their world diverges from ours in that aliens have started knocking satellites out of the sky. And
But it does not diverge from ours in that scientists apparently don't have any sway with politicians in that time either. So
Yeah,
That
but
is-
at least
like
like
they won't listen to me. I'm just a scientist.
that's true, but I want to say that it did make me sad because the idea of scientists as the intellectual elite and you can't trust them makes me sad every day. That even then there was like, hey, here's a scientist. Maybe we'll listen to, at least let's listen to him when we need to.
Yeah.
Now it's
Because-
just like, why are you trying to be smarty pants, Smarterson?
Yeah, he has
We
to like
shouldn't
prove
trust. Why
he
did
has-
you trust him? Like,
he has to
Oh,
prove that
geez.
he knows about a destroyed destroyer before they'll actually listen to him.
yes.
so one thing that struck me, I don't know if anybody else thought about this. So when they're showing a destroyer blown up
Yes.
and planes falling out of the sky and a bomber being blown to shreds,
Hmm.
this is only a decade from the war.
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be, in the same way that Godzilla, original Godzilla would strike a chord if you were in Japan, there's got to be some people who
Well, especially because
saw
this is actual
movie
stock
and were
footage.
like, yeah,
Yes.
no, that's what I'm saying.
That listen to this. What the IMDb says about the destroyer. It's stock footage of the sinking of the HMS Barham, which occurred on the 25th of November in 1941. And it says, to not upset the British public, the Royal Navy decided to withhold an announcement until later. However, in late November 1941, a Scottish medium, Helen Duncan, who had heard of the sinking through a friend, disclosed the sinking during a seance. She was eventually tried under the British Witchcraft Act, the last person before it was repealed.
Holy
I thought that was a
crap.
really interesting little tidbit about that. But yeah, every single one of these is actual footage, not necessarily from the war all the time, like the plane crashes from an air show, but still, yeah, for sure, it's going to be mega triggering for these people.
Well, that is worrisome. I mean, when you think about the fact that last week we really struggled with the question of whether it was okay to thrill to an alligator fighting with a giant lizard, And this week we're looking at a director who decides, you know what would look really good? Let's just borrow that shot of a whole bunch of people dying in the Pacific. And I don't know what to think about that, but that is what's going on here. We're this stock footage is very expertly handled. It's very beautifully done, so that it really does look like Martians are blowing this stuff up. But people die in these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, the bombers, falling on the sky on fire.
Yeah.
That I just can't imagine. Like, now there's a weird, for a lot of us, there's a clinical nature when you watch a documentary that's based on World War II.
That's true.
But the time period of this is not so far that it wouldn't be traumatic for a lot of people, I think, who would go to the cinema to watch a flying saucer movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
really
at the
struck me.
time, people there were film critics who were critical of
Is that so?
the use of, they thought and I quote, I'm actually looking at one now. The semi-documentary technique is pretentious.
Mhm.
So, I think it's real easy to assume that everybody was okay with this even back in 1956. But there probably were people that were bothered by it. And although, frankly, I never, and maybe this says something bad about me, I had never thought about it in those terms until Julia said that just now.
Yeah, I'm not knocking it either, and I do believe though that it's possible that we have a slightly different culture now. That the culture of the 50s was more capable of reframing horrific memories of the war for entertainment value as a means of dealing with those traumas that are different from how we deal with traumas.
Back when we did them, we did talk about like the specter of World War II in that film, and I think Tony makes an excellent point, because there is still kind of some of the same themes that the American government, no matter how impossible, American ingenuity, combined with the American military, can overcome even a technically superior force.
Yes.
And I think that is very, very important to these 50s monster films. Like I don't think that can be ignored, because I do think that's coming from feeling victorious in World War II and the idea that America can defeat anything. And I think it's really important to note that when the Martians, or what we've been calling them Martians, but when the aliens first land, the military shoots first and asks questions later.
Yes.
Like there's like as it turns out,
they made the mistake of landing on a military base too, so that was probably not the best.
Yeah,
well,
but no attempt to communicate is made.
Right.
They walk forward. Yes. They come down, murder, and if you were an advocate for the aliens, you could say, well, they did send a message, although we failed to understand that we had received a message
they're
from
kind
them.
of dicks, man. Like that's
I'm not defending them. They turn out to be horrible. But I'm saying, in the context of this film, it's kind of saying like the American military is always right. We were right to shoot first and ask questions later, because of course these aliens were completely evil, and even if we had been able to discuss it with them, it wouldn't have mattered, because they're monsters.
Well, there's been plenty of stories where the military shoots first and asks questions later, and then it turns out to be a terrible error.
Well, exactly. That had happened in 1951.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what the day the Earth stood still. It just that so in a way, this movie really is in a way kind of a slap at the day the Earth stood still, because they do want to talk, but they want to talk only even if we had listened to them, all they want to talk about is, do you want to surrender now, or do you want to surrender after we destroy all your cities? It's not,
Exactly.
that's all they want to talk about. They have no interest in like making a peace. Whereas in the 51, they shoot Klaatu, and for no reason, but in this case, we shoot first, and we're right to do it. Let me ask a question. When does this reverse, Drew? Like when, or Tony, or Julia, when do we grow paranoid about the government always being right? This 56, clearly the Hollywood machine still believes it. 1966, they sure as hell don't. So when does it flip.
I think in genre films, the first, I'm probably wrong about this, but the first example I think of, bureaucracy being something that can fail is when we start to get into the Romero zombie films, which, had a tremendous distrust of the man, so to
Yes.
speak. So much that that movie ends with the police shooting our hero.
That's
And
1968.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I would say late 60s going into 70s.
yeah. Now, I
Um,
will say, for what it's worth, this might be the dumbest example I can come up with, but Plan 9 from Outer Space came out in 1959. Now, the military are idiots in Plan 9 from Outer Space, and he goes out of his way to point out that the military allowed a town to get blown up and then hid the truth from the American public. So there's paranoia in Plan 9. By the way, that's a terrible movie, so I'm not at all saying that Plan 9 from Outer Space is good by any means, but there's a strain of severe anti-military paranoia going on in Plan 9. But that's 1959, and Ed Wood was a marginalized person, so that might contribute to it a little bit.
I'm not responsive to what you just asked, but to what you were saying earlier, Jason, about you said it maybe in this time they were able, I can't remember how you put it, but they were able to kind of shut off their feelings. And I don't remember how you put it, like it was the media was a coping mechanism. I think I wanted to respond to that in that I think that if you think about what you know about this time, it seems like people were encouraged to not feel things. Like there's definitely, in fact, we just watched the Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood documentary. Won't you be my neighbor, or would you be my neighbor?
Yes.
And the Mrs. Rogers talks about how she and Fred were both raised with this lesson that they weren't supposed to ever get angry. And I think a lot of us identify with that, but especially in that time period, this idea that, let's not express our emotions. So I don't know that it's necessarily that people were like not feeling things as much. I just think that this would have been a coping mechanism because they weren't allowed to express grief, and there wasn't like therapists on every corner and people going to yoga and whatever. It was just, so yeah, that probably was the only way you could kind of.
Well, that's the thesis of The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, which was all about infantrymen coming back from the Pacific War, which was very traumatic, and how they were expected to shove all of that down into cocktails and nightclubs and advertising campaigns and going to work. And if you talked about it, you were crazy. And so they instead. Yeah, so the idea is, hell yeah, let's use the stock footage. Yeah, that thing blows up good. Let's use it. And and everybody's supposed to go along with the joke, or you're not a man. And yeah. So anyway, back to Earth versus the Flying Saucers. It turns out that yes, after this thing lands on an army base and a guy in a Red Alert 2 suit wanders out and they shoot him. They shoot him instantly, and the Martians, I'm going to call them the Martians. I know it's wrong, but the Martians in turn just start shooting and destroy everybody on that base. Then Professor Marvin realizes that he actually has a sped up tape from them. It's sped up. They didn't understand how slowly we move. And so this is the first truly innovative idea about this film, actually. The special effects are indeed innovative, but the idea is this is the first really wild thing, which is that the aliens don't know at what speed we process things, and so they are moving too fast for us. That's truly cool. That was really neat.
So a couple things that I also noticed. One thing I liked is that even though the wife, was it Joan, is sometimes just his assistant, their relationship is actually really good and really interesting. They talk like they're just married, but they talk like a couple. There's a really several times throughout the movie, they talk like a married couple. She's like, hey, he starts kissing on her. She's like, you're gonna start something, you can't finish. And but there's a really positive attitude towards sex, which when they think the world's gonna end, she's like, hey, you should stay a while. This kind of stuff that she's very empowered in this as well,
Yeah.
which
I
really
agree.
struck me, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
To see, because it doesn't happen that often.
Even now.
And I thought that their banter together felt really genuine.
That's a
That was
wonderful
really
statement.
cool.
They do have good chemistry. I mean, a lot of the times you watch these, 50 genre movies and they kind of underserve the relationships, or they don't give you a believable romance. I actually don't have a hard time believing that, these two are in love. And honestly, most of the main characters in this are good actors. There's like a couple of the background characters that are a little more wooden, but the two of them really, this probably wouldn't have been their first choice to be in, but they really give it their all. Like I totally buy them as a married couple, and I totally buy them as people working in the scientific community. Like they sell all of the pseudoscience going on in this film.
Yeah, they do. And I like that she's his assistant, and so she's up on everything. So when they're like kicking back with their it's a very military family. So when they're kicking back with her general father, and having some barbecue on the back porch, they're talking shop, and they're talking freely about their satellites and everything. And also, and one moment that I actually really love is they discuss, well, it looks like aliens are knocking all of our satellites out of the sky. We're gonna have to send up another satellite, but this time with cameras so we can maybe see them. And then they go, all right, well, let's finish our dinner, which I just thought was wonderful. They've decided this alarming thing, but we got a cool spread out here in the backyard, and nothing's gonna get in the
Yeah, we
way
gotta eat.
of our
Yeah.
family dinner. It's delightful. It really, really was. You're right. As I'm saying that, I have a smile on my face. I'm thinking about this because think about this. This might be a dumb example, but it's popped into my head. Um, Wives of the heroes in films like this are often so poorly underserved. Just think about, like, I don't know, the wife in any Von Damme movie, right? Like Time Cop or something like that, where there's a wife, maybe she gets killed and that makes him angry, so he's got to kill some people, or maybe she's just gonna wait at home and say, "You're working too hard." That's all they ever do. This is not that at all. She is
No.
in it. Yeah. No, it's wonderful. So that leads you to think that maybe genre is a place. Of course, Time Cop's genre too. I don't know. I don't have a good excuse for it. It's well
No,
done.
it's just how it's written. It's either written well and believable, or maybe it's not done as well. And
Yeah.
of course, I enjoy, there's other movies where the female lead isn't as strong, and I still enjoy that movie. But it's I guess in these movies, especially of this time period, it's not something you always expect because of how, just society is.
Yeah.
So when you see somebody who's a scientist, extremely competent, like all of that, it shouldn't be surprising, but for that era, it kind of is.
Yeah.
And it's really it's nice to see that happening. That was really cool. Going back to the military shooting first, first when you first see that, you're like, oh man, they just don't care. Like, what if they were trying to be, what if they did come in peace? And then you find out, like, nah, because the aliens are jerks. It's kind of like one of my favorite things from my youth is a thing called Space Giants, and I always joke that the evil guy in that is set up the main character to fail, because he says, hey, I'm this villain, let me show you how powerful I am. I want you to tell the rest of the earth, right? So by doing that, he kidnaps the guy and basically shoves his house into the past where there's dinosaurs. Take pictures of all these dinosaurs and show the world how powerful I am. Of course, he shows it to his editor. His editor's like, so you faked a bunch of photos. What am I going to say about this?
Right.
And then the evil guy comes back and he goes, so they didn't believe me. So none of those dinosaur photos, I can't believe they didn't believe that. I'm going to attack the earth. And these guys are kind of like that. Like, well, I sent you a message. Yeah, but I couldn't reply to the message. Yeah, but man, I sent that. It's not really my problem. Looks like we're gonna have to destroy the earth. Like, you guys can meet up. We'll meet you. If you could really just kind of lay down, we would like that, because you'll blow up the place. You'll kind of wreck it. We'll have to rebuild it. It sounds like a real pain. But if you just kind of hang out, like, it will destroy you in a more peaceful manner.
Yes.
No, but I want to meet you. Can you just? Nope. Transmission. You're breaking up. Must be under a bridge. Like,
Yes.
And then, oh man, I don't want to cut too fast, but just when you think, well, we did attack them first, the aliens fly out over, they're destroying things, and they just shove the general and the cop out the basically just
Okay.
kick them out the door.
So yes, in
Yeah.
fact, where we are right now is that first off, they have kidnapped that general, and so what happens is, so we'll get to them because the
Right.
general that's exactly where we are. But at this point,
Sure.
where we see the general again, the one that we were having dinner with on the back, he gets kidnapped during the attack on the military base, and so the Marvins wind up going to get themselves taken by the saucers so they can talk to them, and a motorcycle cop goes with them for reasons
They
unexplained.
don't know. They don't know that
he's
he's
following
kidnapped.
them because they're speeding. And
Yes,
he gets
right.
there and goes, "Whoa, flying saucer! I should shoot at that."
Yes.
And
And they
he tries
they
to
get
the
get it out.
aliens are like,
Yeah.
the aliens are like, okay, all you guys are coming with in here in the spaceship, and the dad, they didn't know the dad got kidnapped. They assumed he'd gotten killed with everybody else. So they get on the ship, and there's somebody reciting statistics about the world. And she's like, I know that voice. And then it turns out that it's her dad's voice. And they have like zapped his brain and like taken all of the stuff that was in his brain and put it into their computer and used
That's
his voice.
amazing.
And he's just this shell, like zombie shell now,
I
walking around.
always found that so scary.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I couldn't believe
they
that I was really shocked that they did not save him. Like I was really thinking, okay, how are they going to reverse this? How is he going to be reintegrated with his brain? Oh no, they're going to throw him out of the space of the flying saucer, as they fly by. So that was horrifying. I was like, oh my gosh. But I wanted to say before you move on from this.
No, I want to
that
talk about
while
this for a
they're-
second. Yeah.
Yeah, while they're on this flying saucer, the aliens explain how things work for them and how they use yes, they have this magnetic field that they're able to use magnetic force to whatever, but they basically can manipulate time, space, continuum, and so they say we basically stopped time. We're in between heartbeats, and to me, as a Doctor Who fan, I was like, dude, that's what they did with Clara, because at the end of Clara's stint on the show, she dies, but rather than let her finish dying, the doctor pulls her right before her last heartbeat and lets her travel around the universe between heartbeats. So she's traveling around the universe. She's just gone back in time right before in between heartbeats, right before she dies. And I was like, that's where they got that from. So speaking of influential things, I'm thinking that's probably where they got that concept.
That is very.
But that was really neat.
Well,
But this
also,
brain idea. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony.
I find, as a computer person, I think they call it infinite accessibility drive or something like that.
Infinitely indexed memory scanner.
Infinitely indexed memory scanner, where they basically are a hard drive.
Yeah.
They're wetworks in the way that Cyberpunk has wetworks. But it takes up so much processing power that they're zombies because they're just constantly accessing the brain as if it was, a thumb drive for them. And that technology, and they become zombies. Now they tell them that we can get him back. I don't think I think they're just, I think this is BS. Knowing what you know by the end of the movie, you're like,
Tony,
oh no, we can give him back. Hey, we told him we would give him back.
Tony, what you just said is really interesting. So I'm really moved by what you just said because, by the way, this is another of the very innovative ideas of this movie. But what you just said is really fascinating because I misunderstood it until now. I thought what had happened was that they took his brain and put it in their big database. But you just explained why the brain has his voice when it's reciting his facts.
Yeah.
And it's because they're using him as a walking around adjunct to their database. And that means that they could have 300 of these guys from different worlds all walking around carrying the stored knowledge if they picked a knowledgeable person, which is
what
first
they
of
did
all
in that film that we saw the other day, where the people were just copies of themselves, but the actual people had to be hooked up to the which one was that? I always forget which
that
film
was I Married a Martian. I married I married a man from outer space. Well, that's really freaky and terrible. That is really I mean, the horror implications of that are really great, and it is awful.
I also-
Well, this is also a prime example of why I say these two genres are hand in hand. By the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll go
Yeah.
toe to toe with anybody who, whatever. Plus, the good thing is we can him and haw about this, but guess what? We get to call the shots because it's our podcast.
That's absolutely true.
What I like also is that they tell them all this jargon about here's how we do this, and you really get a taste that it's kind of like dick waving. Like,
Yes.
by the way, we're in between time, and then they tell them all this stuff. Like, and so probably one alien's like, what? They're pretty intelligent. Why don't they do something about it? Oh yeah, right. Have you seen their guns? What are they gonna do about it?
So
it's
I love your idea of like what the alien politics are like.
Well, it's very Kodos and Kang.
Yeah.
I should
Oh, you
mention there.
expect them to
Yeah,
strike
yeah.
back?
Uh-huh.
Now I haven't
I'm
read it.
picturing the alien reporter from Futurama for some reason.
Yeah, that
But no,
guy
yeah,
too.
it's definitely Matt Groening all over the place because for sure that's the Simpsons aliens, and then that guy too.
By
Super
the
funny.
way, I bet somewhere the other thing that I thought of, so somewhere out there in the infinite world of human experience, that suit that the aliens wear, somewhere that's a fetish. I bet. I just I'm guessing. I don't know.
It's a weird, but you want to
where,
talk
when.
about?
Yeah.
I often think that every time I see this, that I feel like that suit was influential on the design of the animated series version of Mr. Freeze.
Oh,
Yes.
more than likely, yeah. That's a really astute, observation. I think that
They look so much alike.
man, yeah. Well, it really sets the tone. I mean, they are very iconic, but seeing them in this kind of weird leather suits and just knowing, what we've discovered since the internet was born and that there's a thing for everyone.
Yes.
I watched them move around. I'm like, somewhere, someone's like,
Yes. Somebody was deeply intrigued by this costume.
I don't know
Somebody,
why,
by the way,
but there's
somebody
something-
could cosplay this pretty. I love that it has a big sort of helmet like the Juggernaut, basically.
You just
they-
if you cosplay, you just have to just not mind moving really slowly everywhere. And not being able to pick up things either, because the ends are like these little ball things.
Now,
that they can shoot
over at
at.
Comixology, I just want to mention at Comixology, you can get Ray Harryhausen's Flying Saucers versus Earth. I have not read it. I don't know anything about it. It came out 10 years ago, but it is
That's
an
right.
adaptation of this, and it was put out by Tidal Wave, and by Arcana. And it retells the story of this movie, but I think it does it from the perspective of the aliens. So I have no idea how that works out.
doubt that it's my aliens, but that's okay.
So
What are you gonna do about it?
so they have 56 days. They have like a deadline of like 2 months to get their the leaders of Earth to lay down their arms. So basically there's supposed to be a meeting in 56 days to negotiate for the occupation of Earth. And that 2 months is all that Dr. Marvin needs to say, you know what, like good professors in all of these movies. And this makes him a hell of a lot more useful than Clayton Forrester in War of the Worlds, who comes up with nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
okay, so let me stop you, Jason, and say that I identified a lot with the other science guy who was in the room because he has an idea, and then this doctor guy jumps in and goes, "I have it. I know what we will do." And then the other guy's like, "Dude, I was seriously just talking about that." And then you interrupt, and I'm like, "That seems so familiar because with like something in my life. What is it?"
You must work with a lot of terrible people.
No,
Because
I'm not talking about work.
Oh, shots
I'm talking
fired.
about the ideas that come from the room.
yes, that is
in our house. Ideas
is a
come
phrase
from the room in our house.
I've used often. Whose idea was this? I don't know. It came from the room.
I'm like,
I'll say
no,
that.
that was actually mine. Actually,
Julia
truth
is
be
the
told.
room. That's Julia. Julia is the room, basically. So yes, they have 56 days. Professor Marvin comes up with a weapon that I do not understand at all, and I apologize. When you aim it at the flying saucers, it makes
It
them
like
wobbly.
interrupts the magnetic.
So
field.
what is it? Can somebody and I'm not not BSing you. What is it? Is it a sound weapon, or like what is this?
So the one that they make is sound, which he works with the other guy. The original one, I get the impression it was something magnetic, but they realize, hey, that's not
I
feasible.
think it's the other way around. I think they start with sound, and then they go, no, the sound thing's not going to work for another couple of years. But what we can do is we can interrupt their magnetic force with something else. That's what I got.
So it's just a big magnet weapon. All right. Okay.
Is that what you
I
got,
can-
Drew?
Sounds good to me.
Sure.
All I know is the fact that it's the idea of a sonic gun is what they make fun of at the end of Mars Attacks. So
Oh yeah,
that's my takeaway from this.
It's cool. It's very innovative to think that they're thinking in terms of, well, listen, if projectiles aren't going to work, what can we do with energy beams? I mean, that's not nuts. We're experimenting all the time with microwave weapons and all kinds of stuff.
Whatever the hell they're using, like in Cuba and China, to freak people out in the embassies.
Well, also the science bears out too. One of the big reasons why we don't have like mega lasers and all that kind of stuff is the sheer amount of power it takes. So when they're running out of generators and stuff, it's actually that's a problem that we have. Even the railgun that we have that actually is a railgun that can shoot just miles and upon miles is on a nuclear powered ship.
Yeah.
Because we can shunt power like that. But as far as, getting a laser that burns through things in any amount of time that's worthy, you need an immense amount of power. So the part where they're developing it and then they're burning out generators and stuff like that really felt, somebody had done at least some research throughout the thing, because we still don't have that exactly. Or, if we do, we're not.
I like the practical problem that, or the practical, I don't know, solution that they however they solve the power pack problem, they wind up making a bunch of these guns, and they need a bunch of these guns because the script requires a big old battle. I mean, this movie is fairly simple. By the time, basically when they put these to uses, the aliens come back for their 56-day meetup, and we attack them when they do. And that's, and so you have an enormous battle. You can really feel that this movie has saved up all of its chits to spend now in the last 15 minutes, which is a running, just blasting away. You've got a bunch of trucks with these energy weapons and flying saucers all over Washington D.C. that are all almost destroying a monument and then managing to skirt out of the way and then accidentally moving back and blowing it up. I loved the whole sequence at the end with Washington D.C. because you see everything basically gets
Washington
crushed.
Monument, yeah.
Oh my God.
And before this, though, let's not forget that at one point they are able to shoot the aliens. They take one of their helmets and they notice that the aliens themselves are need these suits as power suits to walk around because they're kind of decrepit and atrophied.
As armor, it doesn't actually seem that advanced because it never seems like it stops even small arms fire.
It doesn't stop bullets
at all.
Yeah, and they have a force field that they can put around their ship when they land, so they can stay inside there and just wave, and they're fine. But the moment they step through the force field, that armor does nothing. I mean, they're relying an awful lot.
They keep doing that.
No,
why do they keep stepping outside?
Yeah, no, Fred, we're not mad at you about the dinner conversation. You should step out and greet the humans. That'll teach Fred. Fred's not coming back. Yeah, he was kind of a jerk.
It handles.
You should step outside. Their bullets will not harm us. He's going outside. Who wants his Nintendo?
Tony, you need to write a whole comic strip about these people, these aliens.
The alien dickery of these guys and their interpersonal terrible politics.
It's really funny.
So yeah, I mean, what do we want to say about this final battle? Because it's really just a big it's a big special effects extravaganza. So what do we want to say here? It's difficult to just narrate.
I love the look of. You keep talking about things crumbling. I love the look of the stop motion crumbling effect. It's not exactly realistic, but it's got something very dreamlike about it. And I could just almost watch an entire movie of that, as strange as that might sound.
Okay,
Well, this is your last chance to do that because Harryhausen quit doing that after this movie.
Back to my experience in CG, I can tell you that I love this so much more than when this is done poorly. Now we can do it better. But also having had to make CG sets that crumble sort of pseudo-realistically or that are put together and then we make computers make them fall apart is a huge pain, and it almost never looks right until recently. There's specialized software that helps with it, and it's always, the good ones are usually pretty expensive. For a long time they just like made things into triangles and just blew that up, and we're like, it's computers. So I love seeing stop motion and really nice model work destroyed realistically, because I think until really recently none of that stuff looked great coming from a machine, and I really enjoyed this kind of stuff. Clash of the Titans, the flood scene, all of that kind of stuff. That is where it's at for me. So I'm totally with you, Drew. The way that it again, in this case, not so realistic, but the way it's done, especially like where we always see the iconic Washington Monument scene. That's like a trope. That gets touted out anytime there's a sci-fi, like, remember flying saucer movies, but the destruction where they're at the Capitol, right?
It looks to me like they destroy Union Station with their people inside. Oh, there's all these great composite shots of people getting crushed by the random destruction going on.
But the Capitol one, I didn't like the Capitol effect. I thought it was really stupid because it's like the thing goes into the flying saucer goes into the dome, and then it kind of blows up, and then you can see that the dome is intact in between shots.
Oh, maybe not. Where are they? This is
probably the Supreme Court. Stupid. I thought it was the Supreme Court.
Where are they? Where the scientist and his wife, the two scientists are?
Yeah, I thought all the columns get destroyed. I thought that was the Supreme Court, but I could be wrong.
Oh, maybe, yeah. So that's what that I really dug. I love the way it looks. But I'm totally with Drew. Like, it's not realistic, but it's realistic in the movie.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, it has a lot of detail and texture to it.
Yep.
Yes.
Like it I just like studying it. Like I like counting. I guess I'm like such a crackpot saying these things, but I like counting like the wrinkles and like cracks in the rubble as they fall. And,
sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's something I find very almost soothing about that, even though these aren't meant to be soothing scenes.
It's interesting to me that this is Harryhausen sort of cracking his knuckles before we're going to get what I think is, to me, just always pops into my head when I think of Harryhausen, which is Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and that stuff. That's just 2 years after that. And you think of like remember the Cyclops wandering around the beach and what was the forgive me, but I think it wasn't in that movie. It was in one of the Harryhausen movies we did where there was a big robot, a big colossus. That's
Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But you had all of this wonderful stuff. He hadn't yet dealt with he had done giant creatures. It's just so funny that all of those things were in like a practical sort of modern world. And then shortly after this, he's going to go full bore fantasy and it'll really be great. I mean, but this is really neat too. And it's our world. I just want to point again at the Washington Monument moment that never gets shown, which is that they crash into the Washington Monument because we shoot them down. So we shoot down a big saucer, it crushes the Washington Monument, which then falls and kills like 30 or so random visitors to Washington D.C.
Yeah, and we see that. We see it happen. That was what was amazing to me, is it's not just suggested. You actually see these people get smushed.
Yes. Yep. So it's interesting that this movie has no problem with the notion that there is a lot of like random collateral damage. in ways that for a couple. This goes back and forth because a couple of years ago, every superhero movie was seemingly killing hundreds of thousands of random people in buildings. Then they've stopped it so that with the most recent couple of superhero films, they always have dialogue that says, "Oh, well, we've managed to evacuate the town, so these are a bunch of empty buildings now."
I kind of how
It's
much grief we got over that thing with whatever that's what was that country that they keep talking about in the Avengers that they
Well,
that they destroyed.
Sokovia was
Sokovia,
a
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but by that time the movie was actually worried about it. Prior
That's
to
what I'm
that,
saying.
like in Man of Steel, you had
But Man of
Superman's just
Steel's worried about it too, because remember, Superman gets like everybody kind of turns on him after that.
only
So
in the
no, that
next
that
movie,
is it is a
Batman
thing
v
now,
Superman.
right?
In Man of Steel, nobody turns against anybody. He's just dropping skyscrapers on Zod. We're way off path right now, but and all these people are dying. Anyway, this is a problem
Well,
that goes way
I
way
want to, I
back.
want to get, I don't want to get, I want to get off path a little bit more on a different direction, which is now to talk about the Independence Day thing, because this is where I started to go, oh, this is Independence Day. Like Independence Day is making is remaking this when they start destroying the cities. I'm like, oh, okay, so there goes Big Ben or whatever it was, and like all this, there goes DC. And I remember watching Independence Day in Houston, and they blew up Houston, and everybody in the theater cheered. But
Yes.
anyway, so this is what I wanted to ask Tony. I was saying earlier is why is it a problem for a movie to go, let's just remake an old movie with
I'm not
new
saying it's a
technology?
problem at all. I'm just saying that's my personal taste. I don't really enjoy that movie for multiple
Do
reasons.
you always feel that way though with movies that are kind of like old movies?
No. I mean, if it's, again, a good movie's a good movie. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that there's, no. I mean, there's tons of remakes that, some of them are arguably better. Again, I'll always go back to The Thing.
Yeah.
I like the black and white movie The Thing, but the Kurt Russell one, like, that's a classic.
You
and a
can
whole
say it's
different, like,
I think it's a superior
really
film.
great. Yeah.
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 Like I don't have a problem. I'm just saying my personal taste is that I would prefer to watch this movie than Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
And that again is your mileage may vary. In no way am I gonna go,
I like them both.
Day is a terrible thing and blah. For me personally, I would rather watch this movie any day. And certainly not the sequel, which was
They made a
that was
sequel to
actually
Independence Day.
I'm
I'm joking. I know
that's the best
I know
answer. That is the best answer. Yeah. I actually have fondness for Independence Day, but but I'm
I
with you.
like it. I like Independence Day. I have fond memories of going to see that. I don't think it's as interesting of a movie as this. And maybe that's because this has a certain charm, and like Tony, I enjoy the retro tech that this movie has on display. Like I like the shiny chrome flying saucers and the like I like the look of the aliens and everything, whereas the modern, although it's not modern at this point because now Independence Day is now 20 odd years old, so it's no longer a modern film, which makes me feel ancient. But the aesthetic of Independence Day isn't as pleasing to me as the aesthetic in this movie.
We won't be able to get a lot out of those 1990s films until we can look at them together and start to see what are the themes that hold 1990s films together in the way that it's easier for us to look at films from the 40s or the 50s and say, hey, these are the themes. Because the distance between us and them makes it easier to see what the themes are.
I think when I talk to young people, because I was watching Jurassic Park with a bunch of people younger than me earlier today, and they see that movie very differently than the way I see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like they seem more observant of 90s. So I think also it's because we as a group are looking at this movie with distance, whereas I think somebody who is in their 20s now probably looks at 1990s movies with a bit of distance. Although the weird thing that we have now, which is the thing you just referenced, is they just made a sequel to Independence Day. They're still making sequels to Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily do that movies so much back in the day. Like that is a more contemporary thing where that kind of didn't really get started until the 80s, where they just keep making installments in a franchise no matter what.
I disagree though, because there's tons of remakes that were from silent films.
That's true.
Remakes, yes, but not like sequels.
What
To do
about
a
like
series,
Yeah, what about all the
you
werewolf movies?
had series movies. Now I don't know about Universal Pictures. That's interesting. But what I was just thinking was you did have movies that were built to be series, but they were usually B pictures, like The Saint. There were like 500 million Saint movies, right? Stuff like that. But
Can you really think of anything that has been like in the Independence Day sequel is almost 20 years apart from the original movie? Can you really think outside of like
no, I can't think of any.
outside of like the road to, I forget what it's called, but I think it's Road to Rio or something like that. The road movie with Hope and Crosby that they made in the 50s. Like outside of that,
okay.
I can't think of too many other examples of
You
that.
wouldn't count like Dracula movies or something like that. You don't count movies that are just the same character
Okay.
being brought back.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like I like the Independence Day was an version. It was an unsuccessful attempt at this, but like what we were just talking about Jurassic Park. Jurassic World is in continuity with all those old Jurassic Park movies from the 90s. It still keeps
For
those
all the animated things like Finding Dory and Incredibles 2,
but
people don't
necessarily look at cartoons the same way, because
that's new.
Cartoons don't get old.
I think you're right, Drew. That
like The Simpsons are the same age as when they started 30 years ago.
You're right that's a thing that is happening now currently. That is a new thing. Like the fact that we can see Mark, and also it's because I don't know. There are a lot of differences between now and the 50s, but yeah, it would be unheard of if Lon Chaney Sr. had lived. It would be unheard of to see a Return of the Phantom 25 years after, in 1950, right? Although what a wonderful notion that would be, but. That they just didn't do stuff like that. Instead, they did remakes. They did remakes out the wazoo. But yeah, no, the idea of a series just continuing on seemingly forever in continuity, that's new. The idea that Mark Hamill can play the same character across, what is that, 40 years? That's amazing. I mean, that's nuts. No, people don't appreciate
that's
quite enough.
Perfect example.
Yeah,
that's another perfect example. We have the same guy playing Luke Skywalker 40 years later.
That is amazing, and people have gotten too like tied up in like the minor details to respect like what a crazy accomplishment that is to have one person play that character 40 years apart, so that you see him young and old. But yeah. The remake question, boy, we need to have a special episode just about the best remakes that ever happened, because you're right. The moment we think, oh, here's a remake I hate, I know that Tony immediately thought of The Thing. There's a million just wonderful remake examples, and it's just people who don't pay much attention to this stuff don't even realize how many remakes they love that are great, because we've been remaking from the very beginning. Where are we? Well, we're in they managed to destroy all of the saucers and all of this big special effects thing. And what's desperate about these aliens is that this is a ragtag band that's looking for, they have superior technology, but they got no aliens back at the homeworld. They are all together.
Because they don't have a homeworld.
They got no homeworld.
That is the thrust. So they want to conquer Earth because their own planet got destroyed.
They're a band of marauders. And so when they are destroyed, that's all of them. There's nobody back there to come
that's kind of depressing.
Yes, it is.
It's the extinction of species.
Well, they came at us the wrong way.
Dicks, though. They're like...
Yeah, but even when animals that are annoying go extinct, we still kind of go, well, that's a bummer.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are going to destroy us all, or enslave us, or make us all hard drives. They're all going to slave us into their hard drive.
See, they could have
and do things like, look what this gorilla person's thinking.
By that logic, though, it won't be a problem when humans go extinct, because we do that to the subspecies all the time.
Just imagine.
That are
so well said.
us.
There is no human in this movie. There's no human in this movie who makes that point. This movie has a very, very sort of, I don't know. Its whole interior monologue is that outsiders are bad. There is an idea that basically aliens are not to be trusted, and these
That
aliens.
fits with the current political scheme.
It's in argument. It's in very much in argument with The Day the Earth Stood Still. They could have written this movie. I'm not saying they should, so that these aliens went, well, we're not going to be able to overcome the Earthlings. So what we need to do is make peace with them and trade all this amazing technology in exchange for, I don't know, you can give us part of Australia, to live in, and they
Okay,
don't
Lex
do
Luthor.
that. Yeah, well, and that has actually been done in other movies where the aliens come here, they are refugees, we put them
So yeah, you
somewhere.
just described Alien Nation.
Alien Nation, and also District whatever it is.
District 9.
District 9, yes, and probably others if we could think, if we thought about it. But that's not this one. They are more like the people in Assault on Precinct 13. There's only so many of them, and they're gonna get into this house and take it over, or they're gonna die trying. And so they die trying. And so after that, we cut to sometime later, and the Marvins are kicking back, and I guess ready for whatever the universe is gonna throw at them next. I would have loved to have seen them come back for something else, honestly. Can you imagine, this is 1956, imagine if in 1958 you had this pair suddenly dealing with some moron who, like, I don't know, cloned dinosaurs. I mean, there's any number of things that
Heart
they
to
could have
heart
done.
with science.
Yes, I would have
Oh man,
happily.
when do we get to make that? I want to
Yes.
make healthy scientist couple.
Yes. Yes.
Not angsty, almost divorced, like healthy relationship science couple taking on the world.
Tony, you're talking about the idea of a couple that is healthy and using super science to save the earth. That is what Drew Edwards is doing in Halloween Man. I hate to call that out. I just want to point that out, that's the whole concept with Lucy Chaplin. It's
okay. I find myself
a super couple.
They are I try to show the idea of a couple that they both have their own thing and they come together and they're awesome together, but they are also awesome separately. And I feel like that's not quite shown enough in things, especially since, as Tony was saying, so much drama comes from couples that aren't functional or healthy. And I think that you can have a happy, healthy relationship where both partners are kind of powerful in their own way, and no one has to be the alpha and no one has to be the beta, and that's not shown enough. So that's really what I was trying to do.
Wonderful. Well, there you go. So that brings us to the end of Earth versus Flying Saucers. I want to get our final thoughts, and then we'll go into any endorsements that we might have. So, Tony, this has actually been a lot of fun to discuss. What lay it on us? What are your final thoughts about Earth versus Flying Saucers?
I love the Harryhausen effects. I love a lot of their pseudoscience and the technology the ideas that they have in this are really cool and interesting. I like the movie. It's not great, in the grand scheme of sci-fi. It's can be a little slow. It's not maybe a perfect movie, but there's a lot to dig about it, and it's a classic for a reason. It's often imitated.
Yes, indeed.
Throughout, and again, I can't even remember how many TV there were, 80s leading into the 90s, but definitely 80s, there were tons of TV kind of documentaries. Like, we're just going to show a thing about, here's a history of sci-fi.
Sure.
And, ABC, CBS would do these things. And almost always that, the clip of the Washington Monument, at least part of it, would be there. I'm sure it's turned up on innumerable TV screens in other sci-fi movies, where some kid's watching an old sci-fi movie,
mm-hmm.
It ends up as its own stock footage later. But I really enjoy it. There's a lot of cool stuff in here.
Very good. Joya, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was really charming. I liked, as we've talked a lot about, the relationship between the married couple, and I think the aliens are interesting. Some of the the concepts are really interesting. There's I don't know. I don't have as many complaints about kind of the science fiction movie whatever. I don't know exactly what it is that you guys are saying that you don't like as much about this one as you do about other science fiction films, because I found it to be about equivalent to anything else I've seen from this era. And so I personally there wasn't anything I didn't like about it in particular, except for one thing, which was the super grating, annoying sound that the UFOs make when they're attacking. That was just driving me crazy. I wish I could watch the whole thing on mute.
By the way, the aliens also, they can make their ship silence, but they know that it annoys humans.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just like
exactly. I am so looking forward to Tony's comic strip on these.
should we turn on the sound? It's humans, of course. Turn it up, and they just slide the slider. Oh, that is grating. Yes, that's why I have noise canceling headphones. But I only brought the one pair. Ha ha ha! And everybody else has to like hold their.
So you're saying that he's not only trying to torment humans, he's also like a narcissist among the aliens themselves.
Oh yeah, they're all dicks. Like they're all jerks to each other as well.
That's fantastic.
You can imagine this is actually a movie that honestly today, if like somebody else is playing it like another part of the house while you're like in the next room, like laying on the couch trying to read, all you can hear is just and the occasional explosion. It is, it's even more unnerving that way. Okay, Julia, did you? Those were your thoughts. Your thoughts were amazing sound. Okay, Drew, thoughts?
Well, first off, I am delighted by this conversation because I think this went very well. I think this is a really fun movie. I really like it. I am a big fan of Ray Harryhausen. I am a big fan of 1950s sci-fi. So I thought this movie would be perfect for this retrospective, and I think this conversation proved me right. So I don't know that I have anything to add, except I hope people would venture outside of their comfort zone. If there are people who listen to this and they only like, I know we have some people that prefer certain genres, like there's a lot of people listen to our podcast who prefer, the Hammer, gothy vampire stuff. We have a lot of people who prefer, the slasher 80s gore stuff, and there's a lot of people who prefer, the universal horror stuff, and all that's great. And I love all that stuff too. But if you've been following along with this retrospective, please enjoy this movie. And, if you watch it and you hate it, I will gladly debate with you on the Facebook about it.
Yes. I would add nothing to that. I think we hit on everything, and I very much enjoyed discussing it. It's a roller coaster ride, and I think it works very well. And deeper than that, I think it's in dialogue with The Day the Earth Stood Still, and has some disturbing things to say about being gleefully paranoid. But the monuments look amazing when being blown up. So let's go around for endorsements. I have no idea. I haven't talked to you guys ahead of time. No idea what you're going to say. So Tony, you first. Do you have anything to recommend this week?
There was something, but other than the fact I finally get to play a show, we get to play a show with Danger Cakes again, but at a Drew function this weekend, which has some of my favorite things, comic books and rock. I'm really happy about that. So
thank you.
I'm sure
that's awesome.
Drew will give the even more details on that. The only other thing that I blazed through was Luke Cage, which I really enjoy, and the soundtrack's amazing. I know sometimes you get people who say, "Oh, that liking popular things isn't great," but Luke Cage, I could watch an infinite amount of Luke Cage beating up bad guys. I could do that as long as they want to make Luke Cage beat up terrible people. I am totally down with that, and they should make as much of that as possible, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my endorsement for now. Oh, also on the music front, which I usually do, I mentioned Haunt before. The lead singer of Haunt, he actually made the whole thing and had other people record. Trevor Church has on Bandcamp. He had another band previously called Beastmaker, and they sing all about horror stuff. He's kind of putting that on mothballs, and he's been releasing these EPs, Beastmaker EPs, for like $1 a piece. Or you can pay more since it's Bandcamp if you want to. But I highly recommend, since we're a horror movie podcast, Beastmaker, and all of these odds and ends EPs. He's put out like 8 of them in the past few weeks and made a label to do this. So check out Beastmaker, buy some EPs. Definitely, I'll always listen to Haunt because I love their music so much. And the dude's a really cool guy who loves horror movies as well, and you can tell from the music that he releases. So I think it's a really good crossover. Again, horror and metal are always 2 things near and dear to my heart. So if those things are also things that you dig, go to Bandcamp and look up Beastmaker, and you can get super cheap music, which sounds great.
You should put the link on the page
I will do that.
after this goes up. Yeah, sometime this week. Cool. Julia, what about you?
Well, once again, I have to what's the word I'm looking for? Endorse, I guess, another documentary, because, like, as I mentioned earlier, we went and saw the Would You Be My Neighbor, Fred Rogers documentary, and it was so great. I cried and cried. It was so beautiful. I loved all the messages. It's such a great film for this time that we're in, because it's not a partisan thing. Fred Rogers was a registered Republican his whole life. It's a just kindness and respect for humanity film, and it's just like, wow, we really needed to hear that right now, because there's so much a lack of that right now. So I just really enjoyed it. Even if you didn't watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood growing up, which anybody in my generation probably did, but the millennials will get a lot out of it. I'm going to make my kids. We didn't take our kids with us because we wanted to have a little Alamo date, but I will make them watch it when it's out on video, because there's for them, even though they've never seen the show. And I'm going to make them watch the show as well. But I think it's going to be a really hard year for to choose an Oscar for the best documentary, because I understand RBG is really good too. I haven't seen that yet, and like I said, the Pope Francis movie. So there's a lot of good documentaries this year that I think it's gonna be a tough competition for which one's the best.
So I have yet to see that, and I need to, but I also have been reticent because I didn't feel like ugly crying for like 2 hours. So
well,
maybe that's a release I need
back of the Alamo
to do. I always do anyway. But yeah, I really have heard nothing but good things, and I really want to see that.
Well, and watch it at the Alamo, because before they start the trailers, they show all this wonderful old like TV, like children's television programs from like the 50s and the 60s. It's so cute and wonderful.
Drew, what about you, Drew? What do you got?
Well, I would be hard pressed to record this week and not mention that July 4th, that would be Independence Day for you Americans. Lucy Chaplin Science Starlet special finally comes out. It's going to be on Comixology for wide release. It'll be available on Indie Planet in a week or 2 after that, and of course in indie friendly comic book stores. Keep your eyes peeled on the Halloween Man Facebook page for that. This book was nearly 2 years of my life. Like, I spent more time working on this individual comic than I think any other comic I've ever worked at. I'm actually looking at a physical copy of it right now, and it looks beautiful. And thank you to Paul and April and Evan and Selena and everybody else who worked on it. And I'm having separation anxiety. The fact that people are actually going to be able to read it and their own opinions and take what they want from it is both exciting and kind of frightening. But all those emotions will be put aside on if you're and in Boston on Saturday. That's July 7th. We are going to have a release party. It will be at the South Lamar location of Hops and Heroes, which is a comic book store that is also a bar. So there's going to be a signing from 1 to 10 p.m. There's also going to be a pinup themed drink and draw to tie into the way Lucy looks. So if you want to come completely dolled up, people will be there on hand to draw a picture of you in exchange for a beverage of some kind. And as Tony was alluding to, I have a wonderful eclectic group of bands, and including Rise from Fire, which I'm really excited about, and Stretch Panic, which is a local all-female punk band, which I'm looking forward to seeing, and of course my lovely wife Jamie, who also embodies Lucy in the issue in a cosplay photo shoot that we did. So, come down, hang out with us, party with us. The whole thing goes from 1 to 10. So there's a long stretch of time that you can come in, come say hi to me, come say hi to Tony, come say hi to Jamie. I'm really excited. My heart's aflutter. The other thing that I guess I got into this last week, like a lot of people, and I wrote a review of it for horrormovies.net. I don't want to go too much into the movie because I did see Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I did enjoy it, even though I think it's not a great film by far. But my takeaway from it is I've started to think why I like a lot of the genres that I like, which I noticed, I love Friday the 13th movies, I love werewolf movies, and I love dinosaur movies, and they're all genres where people get stalked, and 2 out of 3 of those people get eaten. So I'm starting to think that I have a very leftover predator brain in my head. I was like, why do I enjoy these movies so much? So I'm having a very even reflective week as far as that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with me per se, but I get something out of these particular type of movies that I don't get anywhere else, that I find where other people find them very jarring. I find these kind of movies kind of soothing, which I think is kind of strange. So I don't know if that counts as an endorsement per se.
This is self-reflection.
But I did enjoy self-reflection, although I did enjoy the movie, even though it is very silly and is probably best described as a haunted house movie with dinosaurs.
Or the game Dino Crisis, which is Resident Evil dinosaurs.
I'm not a gamer, so I have no reference for that, but sure.
Dino Crisis is basically the Resident Evil engine from the original PlayStation, but with dinosaurs instead of zombies. So, and that's actually why I went to see the movie, because I heard first half is this, second half is that. I was like, wow, I like Dino Crisis. Let's go see this movie. So.
Well, before Jason does his endorsement, it's interesting. I didn't even think about the fact that July 4th is this week, and it is Independence Day, and we've been talking about how Independence Day basically is an homage to this film. So that's kind of a nice appropriate reference there.
Sure.
Good call.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. I hadn't even thought about
that. The day
we
celebrate our Independence Day.
Oh, God. Yes. Yes, indeed. I bitch about that, but the fact is that was a good speech. It was well done. I mean, Bill Pullman can be relied on to give a speech like that. So there you go. My only endorsement is Glow, because I haven't been watching, but Glow is back, and oh my God, we've only watched the first episode, and I loved the first season. Glow is a highly fictionalized version of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling franchise from the 80s, but this is more, it really exists just to show you the 80s and lots of 80s music, and it stars Alison Brie and Mark Maron, and I mean that's really all you need to know, because both of those performers are great. They film in an 80s mall, and I mean, I'm telling you, it looks like they're filming in the 80s. So I was astonished. I love this show.
Glow, I haven't got a chance to see the new season, but I loved the first one, so I can't wait to watch the new one.
Yeah, so that is my endorsement. So yes, well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Atom Age Horror. I cannot wait for where we're going next. This has been a lot of fun. If you want to discuss this film with us or any of the others, or give us more recommendations, come to the Facebook page and let us know what you think. If you are liking the show, leave a review, tell a friend, but certainly leave a review like on iTunes, especially because those reviews leave on iTunes help our search results, and also they get filtered out to basically all of the other apps and neighborhoods that carry podcasts. So that's it. I'm really thankful. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to talk to you next.
Good night.
Happy Independence Day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night.